everyone, welcome back. I'm gonna go ahead and do yet another read aloud today, just because I want to not have to think about it on the weekend. Woo! All right, so we are on officially chapter 4 of the book Refugee. So we are officially on chapter 4. And chapter 4 is going back to Joseph's story. Remember, Joseph is the Jewish boy living under Nazi Germany during the Holocaust. So we're going back to his story. So remember, in our brain, we're going back to the past. Berlin, Germany, 1939. So we're going back into the past. It was like they were invisible. Joseph and his sister followed their mother through the crowd at the Letter Bahnhof, Berlin's main railway station. Joseph and his mother, or Ruth, each carried a suitcase, and their mother carried 2 more, one for herself and one for Joseph's father. So remember, Joseph's father had been arrested and then put into a concentration camp. No porters rushed to help them with their bags. No station agents stopped to ask if they needed help finding their train. The bright yellow Star of David armbands that the Ladows wore were like magical talismans that made them disappear. So during the Holocaust, the Jews, they had to wear this armband they had to put over all of their outer garment, and had a Star of David, which is a Jewish symbol and also a symbol in the Bible. And so they had to wear it so that they were marked people. And I mean, they were highly prejudiced. We're living in an extreme racist times, right? That, so, being marked was not anything that kept them safe. But if they didn't do it, they would be, they possibly could be arrested and punished. Yet, no one bumped into them, Joseph noticed. All the train attendants and the other passengers gave them a wide berth, flowing around them like the water around a stone. The people chose not to see them. On the train, Joseph and his family sat in the compartment labeled J for Jew, so no real Germans would sit there by accident. They were headed for Hamburg on the north coast, where his father would meet them to board their ship. The day that they got Papa's telegram, Joseph's mother booked tickets for all 4 of them to the only place that it would take them, an island half of a world away called Cuba. Ever since the Nazis had been taken 6 years ago, Jews were fleeing Germany. By now, May of 1939, most countries had stopped admitting Jewish refugees or had lots of applications you had to fill out and file and pay for before they would let you in. Joseph and his family hoped that one day to make it to America, but you couldn't just sail into New York Harbor. The United States only let in a certain number of Jews each year. So Joseph's family planned to live in Cuba while they waited. "I'm hot," Ruthie said, pulling at her coat. No, her mother said. "You must leave your coat on and never go anywhere without it. Do you understand? Not until we reach Cuba." "I don't want to go to Cuba," Ruth whined as the train got underway. Mama pulled Ruth into her lap. "I know, dear, but we have to go so all of us will be safe. It will be an adventure." Ruthie would have started kindergarten this year if Jews were allowed to still go to school. She had bright eyes, wild brown hair cut in a bob and parted on the side, and a little gap between her 2 front teeth that made her look like a chipmunk. She wore a dark blue wool dress with a white sailor's collar and carried her white corduroy stuffed rabbit, Bitsy, everywhere she went. Ruthie had been born the year Adolf Hitler was elected Chancellor of Germany. So Chancellor of Germany is not president or prime minister, but it's seen as a really powerful position like the prime minister of Germany. In fact, Hitler ruled Germany completely, even though there was a prime minister that elected him at that time. She never knew any other life except this one, but Joseph remembered how it used to be, back when people saw them, back when they were Germans. So that's a memory moment. We can log that as a memory moment. He remembered back when people saw them, back when they were Germans. So, against Jewish people, racism has always historically been there. But then as the years went on, ideas kind of anti-Semitism, so like racism against Jewish people, got worse and worse and worse. And they went from being seen German, they lived there their whole life, their people had lived there for a very long time, to being other. They had gotten up early, and it had been a stressful day, and soon Ruthie was asleep on Mama's lap, and Mama dozed with her. As he watched them sleep, Joseph wondered what it would be like to be able to tell they were Jews if they weren't in a Jewish compartment wearing armbands with the Star of David on them. Joseph remembered the time in school, back when he was allowed to go to school, his teacher, Herr Meyer, had called him in front of the room. At first, Joseph thought the teacher was going to ask him to do a math problem on the board. So we're living in a memory moment. You can take the quote, Joseph remembered the time in class back when he was allowed to go to school, as your quote. Instead, Herr Meyer lowered a screen with the faces and profiles of Jewish men and women on it and proceeded to use Joseph as an example of how to tell a real German from a Jew. So his teacher did this racist action of using him to, like, as a physical model to teach the other kids how to tell who was a Jew. Terrible. He turned Joseph this way and that, pointing to the curve of his nose, the slant of his chin. Joseph felt the heat of the embarrassment all over again, the humiliation being talked about like he was an animal, a specimen, something subhuman. Without these stupid armbands, without the letter J stamped on his passport, would anyone know that he was Jewish? Joseph decided to find out. He left the compartment quietly and walked along the corridor past the other Jewish families to their compartments. Beyond the next door were the German part of the train. Heart in his throat, skin tingling with goosebumps, Joseph took the paper armband with the Star of David off his arm and slid it inside the inside pocket of his jacket and stepped through the door. Joseph tiptoed down the corridor. The German train didn't feel any different than the Jewish one. German families talked and laughed and argued in their compartments just like the Jews. They ate and slept and read books just like Jews. Joseph caught his reflection in one of the windows, straight brown hair slicked back from his pale white forehead, brown eyes behind wired framed glasses that sat on a short nose, and eyes that stuck out just maybe a little too far. He was about average height for his age, and he wore a gray double-breasted pinstripe jacket, brown trousers, and white shirt and blue tie. Nothing about him had actually matched the pictures on Herr Meyer's presentation on how to identify the Jew. Joseph couldn't think of any other Jewish people he knew that did look like those pictures. The next car was the dining car. People sat at the table, smoking, eating, and drinking as they chatted or read the newspaper or played cards. The man at the concession sold newspapers, and Joseph took one and put a coin on the counter. The concession man smiled. Buying a paper for your father? He asked Joseph. No, he thought Joseph. My father just got out of the concentration camp. All right. So you see the italicized font, my father just got out of a concentration camp. We can log that as again and again. The author is using italicized font to draw emphasis to their idea. This idea being, Joseph's having this thought in his head, and there's no way he could say that, or they would know right away that he was a Jew, right? So he's having this thought about where his father is, but he knows he can't say it. So the emphasis in the, of keeping a part hidden, right? He has to hide part of himself. No, for me, Joseph said instead, I want to be a journalist one day. Good, the news agent said. We need more writers. He waved a hand at the magazines and newspapers. So I have more things to sell. He laughed and Joseph smiled. Here they were talking just like two regular people, but Joseph hadn't forgotten that he was Jewish. He hadn't forgotten that if he was wearing his armband, this man would stop, wouldn't be talking and laughing with him. He'd be calling for the police. Joseph was about to leave when he bought Ruthie a piece of candy. Money had been tight since their father had lost their job, and she would enjoy the treat. Joseph took a hard candy from the jar and fished it in his pocket for another finning. He found one, put it on the counter, and paid for the candy. But when he removed the coin, the armband had slipped out too. It fluttered to the floor, the Star of David landing face up for all the world to see. A fist closed around Joseph's heart, and he dove for the armband. Stomp! A black shoe covered the armband before Joseph could grab it. Slowly, shakily, Joseph lifted his eyes from the black shoes to the white socks, the brown shorts, the brown shirt, and the red Nazi armband of the Hitler Youth. The boy had been about Joseph's age, sworn to live and die for fatherland. He stood on Joseph's armband, his eyes wide with surprise. The blood drained from Joseph's face. The boy reached down, palmed the armband, and took Joseph by the arm. "Let's go," the boy said, and he marched Joseph back through the dining room. So the Hitler Youth was a kind of like a group or organization for German kids. They got these uniforms to wear, the uniforms kind of look like our Boy Scout, Girl Scout uniforms. So they had these uniforms to wear, but their job was to police Jewish children. So they would spy, they would report, they would try to arrest, even though they were kids, they can't really arrest. And then the teenagers were actually very violent, so they would beat people and harm people and very real killed people, Jewish people. Joseph barely could walk. His legs were leaden, his eyes lost their focus. After Herr Meyer had called him in front of the class to show him how Jews were inferior to Germans, Joseph had returned to his seat next to Claus, his best friend in class. Oh, we're back in the memory moment. Claus had been wearing the same uniform as this boy did now. Claus had joined the Hitler Youth not because he wanted to, but because German boys and their families were shamed and mistreated if they didn't. So we have to remember that not all, during this time, not all Germans were racist. In fact, quite a few of them were not. A lot of them were silent because they feared for their life. Which, of course doesn't make it okay, but, if we were humans in that situation, the question is, what would we do? But some of them were shamed and harassed into participating in the Holocaust. Claus had winced to show Joseph how sorry it was that Herr Meyer had done that to him. That afternoon, a group of Hitler Youth were waiting for Joseph outside the school. They fell on him, hitting and kicking him for being a Jew and calling him all kinds of names. And the worst part was Claus had joined them. Wearing the uniform turned the boys into monsters. Joseph had seen it happen. He had done everything he could to avoid the Hitler Youths ever since, but now he handed himself right over to one, all because he had taken off his armband and walked around the train to buy a newspaper. He and his mother and sister would be put off the train, maybe even sent to a concentration camp. Joseph had been a fool, and now him and his family were going to pay the price. Oh no. I'm scared. See you Monday.